Hey, what is going on Twintendo Nation? Hope you're having an awesome day. Today we're going over my top 10 favourite Pokemon of this decade, and as the name implies, this is something I can only really do every 10 years, so this is a special kind of video. With 4 generations and 397 Pokemon to choose from, you can imagine that this list wasn't easy for me to make. So to make things simple, I made a rule that I can only choose one Pokemon from its evolutionary line. Also, for once, I'm including an honourable mention section to Pokemon that just missed out on the top 10. Now, since we'll only be able to make this video every 10 years, feel free to make a list of your own in the comments, or better yet, make a video and send it me. I'd love to see what Pokemon you guys choose. So if you do enjoy today's video, make sure to hit the like button, and if you want to stay up to date with everything Pokemon, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Twintendo Nation. And without further ado, let's start the video. Starting off the list is the only legendary Pokemon I've included, which made its debut all the way back at the start of the decade. This is the vast white Pokemon Reshiram. To be honest, I wasn't a big fan of many of the legendary or mythical Pokemon this decade, but I think for the most part, Generation 5 had some very good ones, especially the legendary trio of Reshiram, Zekrom and Kyurem. Now, if you asked me during Generation 5 what my favourite legendary was, I would have probably said Kyurem, but Reshiram has definitely grown on me. I really love its design and the story it plays within the Generation 5 games. I chose Pokemon Black, which is why I have such a strong affinity with Reshiram. However, if I chose Pokemon White, it is likely that Zekrom could have made this list, as it also has a great design. Still, Reshiram is more than deserving of this list, as it's the last legendary mascot that I've enjoyed its design as well as using in battle. Next up is a Pokemon hailing from the Alola region. I'll be honest, I wasn't a fan of the Generation 7 Pokedex, so there weren't many for me to choose from, but I knew this Pokemon had to be included. This is the disguised Pokemon Mimikyu. I remember when Mimikyu was first revealed in Korokoro, and at first I thought, Pokemon have really run out of ideas as it looked just like Pikachu, which is obviously the point of Mimikyu. I love Mimikyu's lore and the role it plays in Ace Roller's trial in the abandoned supermarket, where it resides in a room with pictures of Pikachu. On top of that, it's just a great Pokemon for competitive with its ability Disguise, which allows it to take a free hit of damage. Just a great Pokemon all around, and my personal favourite Pokemon from Generation 7. Following Mimikyu is the Sun Pokemon Volcarona. I think a lot of us remember our first encounter with this Pokemon in Pokemon Black and White. You encounter Volcarona at the depths of Rowlett Castle, and it's one of the rare few Pokemon that has an overworld sprite. For a few days I actually thought it was a legendary Pokemon after I caught it, since you encounter it at level 70. It has an overworld sprite, and because it was so damn powerful. However, I found out about the existence of Larvesta, and I was quite shocked to see that Volcarona was a normal Pokemon. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought it was a legendary Pokemon for sure. However, just because it's not a legendary doesn't mean it's a bad Pokemon. Volcarona not only has a great design, but can also destroy teams with Quiver Dance. Truly, it's a great Pokemon. Definitely one of my favourite Generation 5 Pokemon, and might be my favourite Bug-type Pokemon of all time. Now, I've tried to avoid adding as many Generation 8 Pokemon on this list as possible, since Pokemon Sword and Shield are very recent, and I didn't want that to affect this list. You know, I like a lot of Generation 8 Pokemon, but how am I going to feel about these Pokemon in a year's time? Some I might like more, and some I might like less, so I didn't really want to include too many, but this is a Pokemon from Pokemon Sword and Shield I thought I had to include on this list. This is the Wild Duck Pokemon Sirfetch'd. Whilst I still prefer Farfetch'd's design, I've been longing for a Farfetch'd evolution ever since I first became a fan of Pokemon back in the 90s. Yes, that makes me sound very old. Whilst I'm unsure if it was worth the wait, I was still overjoyed when Farfetch'd was given an evolution in the form of Sirfetch'd. It has a very solid design and is overall a good Pokemon to use competitively. Like I mentioned earlier, its design isn't as good as Farfetch'd, and in fact I even like Galarian Farfetch'd more than Sirfetch'd, but it's great to see one of my favourite Pokemon get a brand new evolution 2 decades later, so I had to include it as one of my favourite Pokemon of the decade. Dragon-type Pokemon have always been some of my favourite Pokemon, such as Flygon and Dragonite and Garchomp, so I always look forward to seeing what new Dragon Pokemon we get every generation. This is a Pokemon that I included in my top 10 underrated Pokemon video a while back, since I don't think it gets the plaudits it deserves. This is the brutal Pokemon Hydreigon. Whilst I know it is still a well-loved Pokemon, I still think it doesn't get mentioned as much as Garchomp and Salamence. Hydreigon has a great design and was one of the only Generation 5 Pokemon I liked the first time I saw it. In competitive, it's underused and I feel like it is overshadowed by other Dragon type Pokemon. However, for me, it's definitely one of my favourite Generation 5 Pokemon, so it deserves to be placed on this list, and it's also one of my favourite Dragon type Pokemon we've had in a long time. Following Hydreigon, we'll be sticking with the Kalos region for a bit, as these next 3 Pokemon all made their first appearance in Pokemon X and Pokemon Y. This first Pokemon is one I used often in competitive and was actually the first Pokemon I used the Masuda method to get a shiny for. This is the Royal Sword Pokemon Aegislash. Now back in the Generation 6 competitive scene, you'd see Aegislash everywhere. With its unique ability Stance Change, it was so much fun to use. On top of that, it's got a great design. Now I usually dislike inanimate objects being Pokemon, which is why I dislike certain Generation 5 Pokemon in the past like Chandelure, which I actually really love now, but I've grown to really like inanimate object Pokemon, yet for some reason I liked Aegislash from the get-go. I just really liked its design, even though again it was kind of just an inanimate object being controlled by a ghost type. But when I think of my time enjoying Pokemon X and Y, Aegislash is definitely one of the reasons why. It was so much fun to mess around with the stance change ability, using King's Shield to get your opponents to attack you and lower their stats. It was just really good fun, and its shiny is definitely one of the best shinies I've ever owned for sure. It's definitely one of the best shinies ever designed. Up next is a very popular Pokemon, which I'm surprised we didn't really get another Pokemon like it this decade. This is of course the intertwining Pokemon Sylveon. Sylveon is surprisingly the only evolution of the decade, as I'm sure a lot of us expected an evolution to make an appearance in Generation 8 with Pokemon Sword and Shield. Of course, it's no surprise that someone who has an Eevee as his channel mascot chose the only evolution of the decade for this list. Sylveon in fact is one of my favourite evolutions. It's got a great design and can be a real powerhouse of competitive Pokemon if used right. There's not much more I can say on it, it's just, its design is one of the best out of the evolutions. I love its colour scheme they gave it. Overall, a very good Pokemon and worthy of being the only evolution of this decade. This next Pokemon was a hard choice, as I could only choose one from its evolutionary line, which is of course a rule I mentioned at the start. I can only pick one Pokemon from, an evolutionary line. So this is a soft tissue Pokemon, Goomy. Originally I wanted to go with Goodra, as I love its design and overall characteristics, but Goomy is one of my favourite Pokemon this decade for sure. I remember when I first saw it and I couldn't believe it was a dragon type. I fell in love with this thing when I first saw it. I was so excited to see what it evolved into, and I was definitely not disappointed. Goodra was fantastic, I used it all the time, but I guess the reason why I like Goomy more than Goodra is because it kept making appearances. When I opened Pokemon cards on the channel back when I first started, I would often pack Goomy. And then later that year, I covered Pokemon Super Mystery Dungeon, which again included Goomy right from the start. I always liked Goomy beforehand, so seeing it over and over again made me love this little guy even more. Just missing out on the number 1 spot is the first Pokemon revealed from Generation 5. This is the Illusion Fox Pokemon Zoroark. I remember when Zoroark and Zorua were first revealed, and honestly, I wasn't really a fan specifically of Zoroark. I actually like Zorua, but for some reason I can't exactly remember why I didn't like Zoroark. But now I think it's one of the best Pokemon designs we've ever had. I actually thought Zoroark would be a certainty for the next Super Smash Bros. At the time, because obviously in Super Smash Bros. Brawl we had Lucario, and I really thought Zoroark was trying to be Generation 5's answer to Lucario. And whilst Lucario has stayed as popular as it has been since day one, Zoroark seems to have faded away slightly. I mean, I guess it helps that Lucario has still stayed in Smash Bros. It got a Mega Evolution, it was also in Pokémon Tournament. Zoroark hasn't really seen the same love. Its ability Illusion made it a delight to use in battle, as it would take the appearance of the Pokemon in the last slot of your party, which made things very interesting in competitive Pokemon battles. Games aside though, it also got a movie about it in Zoroark Master of Illusions, which was the final Diamond and Pearl series film, which honestly was all the more reason for me to love it, as that was one of my favourite Pokemon series. So this film definitely helped me like Zoroark more than I initially did at the time, because I don't know why I didn't like it, and I definitely think that Zoroark deserves more recognition going into 2020. So before we go over my number 1 Pokemon of the decade, I wanted to talk about my honourable mentions. Normally I don't do this, but because there were so many Pokemon that just missed out on this list, and believe me, I rewrote this list quite a few times, I thought they deserved a mention. So these Pokemon include Excadrill, which is a great designed Pokemon, Whimsicott, a great designed Pokemon again, and also really fun to use in competitive back in Generation 5. Ferrothorn I used a lot in Pokemon X and Y, and whilst its design isn't the best, I just have so many good memories using that thing. Trevenant, a great design from Generation 6. Hooput Unbound, I know it's a form, but Hooput Unbound was definitely my only mythical Pokemon I really liked. I think it has a really good design and is kind of underrated. Also Rowlett, I didn't actually pick this Pokemon when I played Pokemon Sun and Moon, but I think it's definitely one of the best starter first evolution designs we've had in a long time. Then there's Lycanroc, which is one of the only few Generation 7 Pokemon I liked. There was also Cosmog, which is the most useless Pokemon, but I love its design, and yeah, I think if it had a really good move pool and could actually use some attacks, it could have made this list. Then there was Wooloo, which I think is definitely going to grow on me. It was slightly disappointing, its evolution. Double just wasn't that good in the end, and I eventually dropped it from my team, but Wooloo is just a great Pokemon. Then there's Yamper, was kind of going to choose Boltund, but Yamper is just a great Pokemon, a very lovable one. And finally, one of my favourite Generation 8 Pokemon is Snom. It's such a cute Pokemon and I'm so glad to see like actually a load of people like it, so just missed out on this list. But we finally reached my #1 Pokemon of the decade. And even I am surprised that this is the Pokemon I've chosen, as I never really realised how much I actually liked it before compiling this list. This is the Ninja Pokemon Greninja. Yeah, my favourite Pokemon is a starter Pokemon, maybe not the most exciting, but I do remember that I was going to choose Froakie day one when Pokemon X and Y were first announced. Now out of the 3 starters revealed, Froakie was my least favourite, but I always chose a water type and I was just not really looking forward to seeing what Froakie evolved into. But my faith was not misguided, as Greninja was by far the best final Evo of the 3. I thought Chestnut was fine, Delphox is probably the worst final starter evolution ever, so someone who was very tempted to choose Fennekin, I was very glad I chose Froakie. Now as I said, it's probably the best final Evo of the 3, and I think it's quite possibly the best design starter this decade. I used Greninja all the time when I played competitive Pokemon, as I used it in my doubles team because it had the exclusive move Map Block, which just made my opponents rage really, because I just blocked their attacks and then attacked them back. So that was really fun to use. It also was included in Super Smash Bros. 4 to my surprise, and even got a special form with Ash Greninja. Now I can't say that I'm too bothered about Ash Greninja, never really liked the idea of that. But this Pokemon definitely got the most special treatment out of all the Pokemon I can think of this decade. I think its design is definitely one of the best Pokemon we've ever had, and it's the Pokemon I will remember the most from this decade. So those are my top 10 favourite Pokemon from this decade. Honestly, this list could be a lot different. I think a lot of Generation 8 Pokemon will eventually make this list over time, but I didn't want to include some because of the recency effect, because I don't know how I will feel about them in a year's time. But this was a very hard list to compile. It would have probably been easier if I did a top 20. But yeah, some great Pokemon in here, and some great Pokemon in honourable mentions, and even some great Pokemon I considered that weren't even mentioned in the honourable mentions. But yeah, those are my top 10 favourite Pokemon, as I said. Let me know in the comments below what your top 10 favourite Pokemon were from this decade. And of course, if you did enjoy this video, it's just a little fun video to end this year and this decade, make sure to hit the like button down below. And if you want to stay up to date with everything Pokemon, you're in the right place. Make sure to hit the subscribe button down below to become a part of the Twintendo Nation. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and of course, hope you have an awesome decade, and I will see you on the next video. Peace!